Good day. Welcome to lesson 3 of this module. This lesson will be discussed about invasive species, their characteristic, and their effect to the environment. So we will have and give an example of invasive species here in the Philippines. So let's begin. Invasive species. What is invasive species? An invasive species is an organism that becomes overpopulated and negative alters its new environment. An invasive species is an organism that is not indigenous or native to particular area. So when we say invasive species, these are the species that are tending to spread prolifically and undesirable or that can harmful in our environment. So invasive species adversely affect the ecological, environmental, and or economic damage.
Examples of invasive species. Tremolina odorata is a fast-growing perennial shrub native to South America and Central America. Tremolina odorata is isa ka tropical o subtropical nga species sa bulak nga tanom sa pamilya nga sunflower. Kini usa ka makahilo nga tanom nga adunay taas nga lebel sa nitrates sa mga batan-on nga tanom, nga adunay 5 to 6 times kadako nga mas daghan kaysa sa lebel nga makahilo sa wildlife. Cromolina odorata is ginagamit kini sa pagtambal sa mga samad, paso ug infection sa atong panit. Also, it is native to the Americas from Florida and Texas in the United States south, through Mexico and the Caribbean to the South America. It has been introduced to tropical Asia, West America, and parts of Australia. Fish Hypostomus plecostomus, commonly known as the janitor fish, is not a native fish of the Philippines. Decades ago, it was accidentally introduced to one of the country's river, also known as the sucker-mouth catfish or the common pleco. Is a tropical freshwater fish belonging to the armored catfish family, named for the longitudinal rows of armor-like scutes that cover the upper parts of the head and body. They can grow to be a maximum size of 50 centimeters. Ang Plecostomus is kung gamay pa siya, dili siya aggressive o isog. Pero kung muanam pud sila kadako, muanam pud sila ka-aggressive o isog. Ang uban Plecos species can reach 24 inches in length or more.
Invasive alien species are plants, animals, pathogens, and other organisms that are non-native to an ecosystem, and which may cause economic or environmental harm or adversely affect human health. Characteristic of an invasive alien species tackled in this lesson is number 1, plants or animals that wreak havoc on ecosystem when they move in or take over. It is where plants or animals take place or move in different places. Number 2, organisms that are not indigenous or native to a particular area. Number 3, can easily adapt and reproduce quickly compared to native species. When we compare the characteristic number 2, it is not particular or it is not common to that certain organism. But compared to characteristic number 3, it's said that can easily adapt kung what the environment that certain organism can easily adapt. It will adjust and reproduce quickly. Mapadaghan siya og dali. Paspas siya nga mudaghan. It is what it said. Madaling maparami ang kanyang it will reproduce quickly. And lastly, characteristic number 4 tackle in this lesson, second leading cause of the biodiversity loss next to habitat destruction. So, it said that it will have biodiversity loss. It will lead, this characteristic will lead to biodiversity loss next to habitat destruction. May destruction na magaganap in this characteristic.
Not all non-native species are invasive. Figure 3.1 describe how a non-native species become an invasive species. Dili tanan non-native species kay invasive. Ang figure 3.1 gi-describe giunsa sa non-native species nga mahimong invasive species. Adaptation to the new environment. Nag-change sila to new environment. Mass reproduce quickly compared to non-native species. Mas paspas sila magpadaghan kaysa non-native species. More competitive against native species in terms of food, shelter, and space. Mas competitive sila laban sa native species in terms of food, shelter, and space. Eliminate the species that are native to the environment. Tanggalon ang species na native sa environment or sa atong palibot. Affects the economy and lost biodiversity. Naka-epekto sa ekonomiya o pagkawala sa biodiversity.
Ornamental purposes. Water hyacinth or Eichhornia crassip were introduced in the Philippines for ornamental purposes. However, no record how this species become invasive in ponds, rivers, and lakes. The rapid proliferation of this species clogs water causing flood when heavy rain occur. It is also considered a nuisance as it reduces food for fishes. So, when we say, from the word ornamental, is a serving or ended as an ornament decorative, or a plant or tree grown for its attractive appearance. So I have an example of this water hyacinth here in the Philippines. So, nice siya tan-awon pero sa iyang kadaghan makakause siya og damage sa atoang environment. Kay dili kadaloy og tarong ang tubig maong magbaha kay nga puno na ang kanal. And kani nga pan is wala na isda kay according to the owner, maglisod og buhi diri kay mga matay tungod sa kadagan sa water hyacinth, resulting decay process template dissolve oxygen in the water.
So, invasive species can change the food web in an ecosystem by destroying or replacing native food sources. The invasive species may provide little to no food value for wildlife. Invasive species can also alter the abundance of the diversity of species that are important habitat for native wildlife. So, economic purposes. In the Philippines, One of the IAS introduced for economic purposes is the Nile tilapia, or we can call Oreochromis niloticus. These fish were released to boost the fishing industry. Niloticus, however, competes with other fishes that are native to aquatic environment. Moreover, the adults are voracious feeders and are threat to the indigenous and endemic fishes. So, it is one example. Nile tilapia, or we called Oreochromis niloticus, is one example of an organism in economic purposes. So, invasive alien species exacerbate poverty and threaten development through their impact on agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and natural systems, which are an important basis of people's livelihoods in developing countries. The economic and social impacts of invasive species include both direct effects of a species on property values, agricultural productivity, public utility operations, native fisheries, tourism, and outdoor recreation, as well as costs associated with invasive species control efforts. So that's it.
Table 1 shows some of the IAS species that already established their population to their environment. Therefore, such species cannot easily be removed and may cause further damage to the ecosystem. Gipakita sa Table 1 ang uban sa mga species sa IAS, invasive alien species, nga nagtaguyod na ng kanilang populasyon sa ilahang palibot, environment. Ang ingon nga mga species dili dali makuha o mahimong kining hinungdan sa dugang nga kadaot sa ecosystem. Table 1. IAS and their impact to the environment. Epekto sa environment. Species. Diposarcus disjunctivus. Common name, janitor fish. Pathway of introduction, aquarium trade. Impact to the environment. Adverse competitor of indigenous species. Dili maayo nga kakompetensya sa indigenous species. Species, Gimelina arborea. Common name, Gimelina. Pathway of introduction, lumber or kahoy. Impact to the environment. Increase the acidity of the soil and its seeds are toxic. Dungagan ang acidity sa yuta o ang lison niya kay toxic.